Hi there. I broadcast a regular live show on playchess.com every month, the Power Play show, and before each show generally I like to set a puzzle to stimulate interest and link it with the theme that I'm going to be discussing. And before the show that I broadcast last Wednesday, I set a position which provoked a lot of discussion on my YouTube channel and provoked a great deal of debate actually during the show as well. So I thought what I'd do in this clip is take a look at some of your suggestions and also just try to summarize exactly what's going on in this game. It was fantastically complicated. So okay, here goes. It's the game Skoberna against Ortiz Suarez from the Slovenia-Cuba match in the recent Olympiad from Istanbul. Well, let's start from this position. It's not the actual puzzle position, but let me try and put the whole thing in context. White has an isolated queen pawn here, which gives him more space, and he's developed very quickly, and you can see that White's pieces are very active. He has, the initiative here. Black has the two bishops, and in particular, of course, that dark squared bishop could be very useful indeed. And the queen is very active. And I think if Black manages to consolidate in this position, he could stand better, just because of those two bishops. So White decides to play very actively here with d5. Now I think this makes a lot of sense. You can see that these pieces are all lined up against the f7 square, so it makes sense to play d5 to blast open the diagonal. And I think Black reacted very well here. He played knight e5, attacking the bishop. White took on e6, Black recaptured, and White took on e6. I'm not going to go into these moves too much. It's a very complicated position. I've got a lot to discuss later on. Okay, now you can see that Black's pawns are actually looking really ugly now. None of them, they don't protect each other. This is the problem. But Black has managed to open up the f-file, and you can see that Queen and Rook are bearing down on f2, and of course White's queen is actually attacked in this position. So suddenly Black has activity. So the queen had to move, and White chose to play the queen to e3. I think in this kind of position, considering the exposed state of Black's king, I might have tried queen g3 here. I'm sure Black is alright here, but I think this might present more problems. But queen e3 was played, and now, maybe time pressure is involved, but I'm really kind of shocked at the way Black played this position. Black snatched the pawn on b2, a really greedy move. I think it would have been much simpler to take on e3. Now, material is level here, but after knight g4, I think Black has a really powerful initiative. There are threats to the pawn on e3, to the pawn on b2, and there's also a nice idea of playing the bishop up to e5 as well, to attack down here, and then there's a potential invasion on f2. And I don't think White has enough in this position to compensate, so I think that would have been a really simple way for Black to play. But no, Black took the plunge and took the pawn. I think this was just too risky. Okay, let's take a look at what happened. Maybe White could have done better here, but okay, he played knight f4. Maybe rook b1 was a better move, but let's cut to the chase and get to the critical position. Knight f4 certainly looks in the right direction here, looking at these weak pawns on g6 and e6. Okay, Black continued the rampage and took another pawn. Now, this has a defensive purpose as well. Of course, the queen protects the pawn on e6, and it's still very active as well, looking at the f2 pawn. And now White played rook c7. It might have been better to play rook d2 there, but okay, let's crack on. This is of course a very tempting move because white is gaining control over the 7th rank, and again this is a consequence of the pawns being split. There's no pawn on f7, so the 7th rank is very weak. So rook takes bishop check is threatened, followed by queen takes knight. So black had to, well, he didn't have to, he played the bishop back to h8. In fact, knight g4 would have been a much better move. But okay, it's all water under the bridge. Let's get to the critical position. And this was the position that I set as my puzzle before my show. And in this position, white actually has a winning move. The funny thing is, so many moves were suggested in this position. I mean, it looks so dangerous. You can see all of white's pieces are really active, and black's king is really suffering here. But there's really only one move that wins. First of all, let me show you what happened in the game. White played rook e7, which looks quite tempting to be able to play knight takes pawn. But in fact this move lost very quickly to queen a4. I'm sure time pressure was involved in this game because you don't make blunders like this under normal circumstances. And because of the double attack to these pieces, black is just winning, and the game ended like so, and actually white resigned in this position. He's just a piece down for nothing. Okay, well so that was a disaster. Let's go back. So instead of rook e7, let's look at some of the alternatives. There were some excellent suggestions on the channel. Let me see. Let's start with knight takes e6. An interesting move. Uncovering the line here to the pawn on h6. In fact, knight g4 is an excellent response. I know black's knights and the rook look really menacing, but after knight g4 there's not a lot that white can do, because white has to keep guarding f2 and keep guarding the knight as well. So for example, after queen d3, queen takes e6, the queen cuts back, defending g6, and black is just a piece up there. So let's go back and see what else we have. Sorry, let me just find the position. So here we go. Knight takes g6 was suggested by quite a few people, and this does look very tempting indeed, crashing through to the king. And after knight takes, now there are two possible moves. Well, queen h6 is the most obvious, threatening a checkmate here and here, but this fails to the old back rank counter attack, and boom, and that's checkmate. So queen g3, however, guards the f2 pawn and threatens queen takes knight. But bishop g7 is a beautiful defense, and I think very easy to overlook. I can understand why quite a few players might have overlooked this move. So it's just blocking the check basically to the king, so that after queen takes knight, again there is this back rank trick and black wins. Instead of that, well, there's really nothing that white has here. White is just a piece down now. For example, knight e4, maybe with the threat of, well, I'm not quite sure what the threat. Well, yes, now that's guarded. Now you're threatening here, but actually this is a very strong move. And again, we have this double attack because these pieces are loose. Okay, let's go back. Just bear with me while I reset the pieces. Okay, so these knight sacrifices on e6 and g6 simply aren't working. What else? Knight h3 was suggested. Now that is a very dangerous move indeed. The knight covers the f2 pawn, and now of course queen h6 is threatened. This is very dangerous indeed, and I think black has to play very carefully here just to survive. But there is a move, namely queen a4. Again, we're exploiting the fact that this rook is loose. So okay, the rook moves, and now the queen probably does best to go to g4, and well, after queen h6, in fact there's a defence. We can play queen h5, of course, that guards against queen h7. And well, in this endgame, black is absolutely fine. For example, well, you can take this pawn, but then after a5, black has tremendous counterplay. This bishop assumes a very important role actually in the corner, covering the a1 square, and well, black is not worse in this position. Okay, let's go back. And if the queen just slips away, then well, rook d8, and this is a very strong counterattack. Don't forget, we've got this back rank trick again, supported by the queen on h5. So knight h3 is close, but after this tricky defense, queen a4, black is actually fine. Knight c4 was suggested. Now this is a serious move, a very serious move indeed. Of course, the idea is after knight takes knight to play queen takes, and that's checkmate. But again, black has a defense based on this loose rook. Queen c2 is an excellent move, so threatening the rook. And well, let's say rook c1, and very strong move, threatening here. So okay, h3 solves the back rank problem. Okay, black exchanges, and the queen comes back. Now, it looks like pretty desperate defense, but actually black is alright here. So we're threatening the rook, and let's say rook takes, and now the queen counterattacks. I mean, this queen is just doing sterling work. It really is. The way it's bouncing around the board, from a2 to c2, back to d8, and now around to h4, and this is fantastic stuff. Threat to take here, but also knight g4. And if knight takes, well, we're actually going to transpose into an ending where black is better. Right, let's go back. So knight c4 comes very close, but black has a good defense. Let's look at the move which actually wins white. There is a winning move here, and well, it's an extraordinary move. You can see in many of these defenses this rook is loose, but also this pawn is loose as well, and that gives black a saving move. So if we play rook f1, we solve both problems. The rook is now safe, and f2 is protected. And in this position, although black has a whole move to try to defend against white's kingside threats, in fact there is no defense. He's helpless in this position. The black queen just can't get back to the defense in this case. Okay, let's have a look at some plausible continuations. Okay, what about, well, let's try and move the queen back. So we're threatening queen takes knight. But now knight e6, okay, we're crashing in, threatening the rook, threatening queen h6, and if queen takes d6, we take here. Threat to play queen h7 mate or rook g7. Okay, the rook interposes, but we take. Okay, knight takes will just be met by queen takes pawn, and that's mate. And if king takes, we check, and well, this is a forced win now. For example, here and queen here. The king can't step up because of knight e4, and we take the bishop. Okay, it seems a bit complicated, but okay, actually white's moves are pretty straightforward there. Okay, what about rook d8? Knight g6. This just is the end. So knight takes knight and queen h6, and threatening two checkmates on the move. What else have we got? Let's go back. What about bishop f6? Now that's a tricky one, because if knight g6 in this case, black defends with knight e7. This was the point of bishop f6. So now the e7 point is covered, blocking the 7th rank. But after bishop f6, knight h5 is actually a winning move. So, well, before we look at that one, let's have a look at pawn takes knight. The queen comes in, and well, this is going to be the end. Okay, what else have we got? So after knight h5, queen d5, knight takes. Okay, this is also winning for white. Okay, let's look at one more. After this, knight g4. How's this? Well, we don't need to go for the endgame. Remember, black's queen is covering, but we can just play queen e4. Threatening queen g6, and well, threatening everything. Threatening this one, it's too much. So there we go, a quiet move. Rook f1 is actually the only clear way for white to win. There are some other tricky tries, but rook f1 is the only winning continuation in the game. Very complicated indeed, but I hope you enjoyed some of those. Thanks very much for watching. There'll be more clips posted on the channel very soon.